Tennessee diploma project standards, those standards that we just left. And so it's important when we start talking about, oh, how we're doing on TCAP, well, those two things are not aligned. So it's very important for us to get an assessment that is aligned to the Common Core state standards and then start talking.
I just want to address one thing, and again, here at Fox 17, we're not taking a position on this discussion, but as journalists, we do notice some things. Just recently, the Pearson Charitable Foundation paid nearly $8 million settlement to the state of New York because the foundation was creating Common Core curricula and was passing it on to its for-profit organization, Pearson, which is a multi-billion-dollar organization. And so there's certainly the appearance that some of this may have been driven by profits and not so much the standards. Again, it's just a news story, one to bring into this. I want to get back to our audience and find what this gentleman has to say. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what's your question?
My name is Dan Davis. I live here in Antioch, Tennessee. Actually, I am a former metro teacher. I just completed my 17th year at Pearl Cone there in Timberbank High School. I'm now a new head football coach and history teacher at Mount Juliet Christian Academy. So I have a lot of play in this, actually. But in regards to Pearson, I understand that many things that happen in Metro Nashville Public Schools are driven by Pearson, from the software that the teachers use to take roll to the books that are coming in. Just on that side, since you brought it up. But one of the interesting things that we talk about, things like the NAEP test, we talk about the achievement scores, things of that nature, but the achievement gap, especially between Caucasian students and minority students, is widening, especially here in Tennessee. And when we look at the test score, we talk about the TCAP, and we look at the TCAP score, especially in high school, algebra 1 score was down 4% in the district. Algebra 2 went down as well. And we talk about all these great things in NAEP, yet you look at this and you look at the scores, and it's going down through implementation of Common Core. Well, how can we justify really delivering such poor mathematical standards and these techniques to our children? We can look on YouTube and in the news and all these social media sites and internet, and we see all these bad examples of how bad these Common Core math concepts are when we just don't teach 2 + 2 is 4. You just say you don't live in a multiple choice world. Yes, you do. I choose whether I'm going to go to work or I'm not going to go to work. That is a choice. We talk about in-depth thinking and things of that nature. I took the AP test when I was in high school. I took IB studies and I took those tests. And they were multiple choice as well as essay. I had to think pretty deeply. So we say those things, and those are just really buzzwords that try to make it sound better than it actually is. But please address that question, because these are real things. And like I said, education is so vital to our children, because we can lose not only a generation of children in Tennessee, but we can lose our country in one generation just through education alone. And is that serious?
Here.
Back in this discussion, and looking broadly just a little bit, just for a moment, step away from Common Core. Why is it that some schools can take standardized tests and have a set of scores or performances, and a similar school with the same demographics performs significantly worse? Any insight as to why we see those things happen in some school areas and school districts?
I know that, like I said earlier, there's autonomy in the classroom. Teachers can teach the way they want to teach, and that's okay. Now, we do have certain standards. There are standards that we're made to teach to, and certain standards that we're expecting students to do. So I can't answer that. I can't explain to you. I think if we knew that answer, then everything would be great.
Well, I think it's important to consider the possibility that it's a fact that more than 36 times Pearson has had to pay out massive settlements and have been involved in lawsuits because they have mishandled standardized test scores. They have misgraded standardized test scores across entire states and nations. England, Wales, Scotland, Guam, go across the country. In fact, in many states, they have been basically removed from the acceptable testing vendor list, and yet we continue to hand them the state of Tennessee through Common Core. And Common Core is being driven as much by multinational corporations and billionaires as it is anything to do with education at all.
Let me follow up with Jason. We're now discussing Common Core. A few years ago, there was no child left behind. The whole notion of standardized testing in scores, and we've heard anecdotally stories about schools and teachers teaching to the test. Does the whole issue of standardized testing handcuff the teacher's ability to be flexible and to teach to their children as they may change from year to year, class to class?
Well, I don't think there's any denying that everybody in every classroom across the district has different kids. And it's the responsibility of the teacher to get to know those kids and to really start to develop relationships with those kids so that you can structure your instruction so that it's personalized for them. But I don't think we're ever going to get away from the conversation of accountability in education. And so whatever the demand is for accountability, I think there's always going to be a test. Whatever that test is, we just need to make sure that it's as closely aligned to what we're doing in our classrooms as possible, and that it's representative of what the kids actually know. Not something that's just showing one day what they could do on that day, if they could guess a certain answer. I want to have something that shows what they know a little bit more, a little bit deeper.
Well, Jason talked about accountability, and I've got to be accountable as well because our viewers at home are weighing in on this discussion. So let's check with our social media desk. Bob, what do you have for us?
Yeah, Mark, we've got a number of people weighing in on Twitter as well as Facebook on this topic, of course. It's a very emotional one. You have some people very pro. We must prepare our students for the world awaiting them after high school. And of course, Dave Mansouri talked about going back to 2007. You had the test and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce saying that students from Tennessee high schools were not prepared for college and real life. So that was the gist behind the move towards changing the standards to begin with. But then you have a lot of folks, as we look on Facebook, this from Rick Pellicchiati, it's not so much the standard people object to, it's the content of the curriculum. It's the first time public schools have ever purchased copyrighted curriculum that a company makes a profit from. And then Amanda Fagley says the biggest problem with Common Core is every school has to have it, but they are only given guidelines. They're told to teach Common Core stuff, but not how to teach. Common Core is supposed to make it where kids that move and switch schools well. Anyway, she goes on there, but I guess a lot of folks agree that higher standards are good. How are you getting there? So the question on the curriculum itself seems to be very much a hot topic. What is in the curriculum? Who's deciding what's in it? And is there somebody behind it?
David, I'm perhaps the biggest capitalist here, but having said that, is there a disconnect at all? Can you have a for-profit organization and develop a good product at the same time? Are they compatible, or can you do that?
I mean, that's a great question. I think what I would say is there's nothing different that's happening with Common Core that we haven't already done as a state. The state, you know, for better or worse, oftentimes doesn't have the capacity or the ability to write tests or write textbooks. And so oftentimes, and this has actually been true for dozens of years, that our state or local school districts have purchased textbooks from both nonprofit and for-profit companies. And I think the most important thing, though, is that we're making sure that the decisions about what textbooks we're using and what curriculum is being used in a classroom or local school district or local school are decisions that are made in that school and in that school district. And in that classroom. And I think the teachers here can probably talk more to that in terms of how they decide what curriculum and textbooks that they use, but none of that has changed with Common Core versus what we were doing previously in Tennessee or in any other state.
Julie, actually, I know you want to weigh in, but let me just pivot off of something David just said. He made a statement that some states have challenges writing textbooks. Are state and local governments shirking their responsibility in terms of educating the youth?
For him and for me?
For you, Julie.
Well, I would say the content of our textbooks is absolutely scandalous to the point that there have been hearings. I've had a principal say to me, well, yes, we know the content is bad, but it's what we have to teach because it's on the test at the end of the year. In the Common Core hearings that were held this summer, we heard a senator from Georgia testify to the fact that under normal circumstances, exposing children to some of the English language arts content would result in felony obscenity charges. However, since it was on Common Core required reading lists, they weren't sure what to do about it, which is why their state was beginning to pull out. And beyond that, for all of the talk about the beautiful high standards, there aren't even Common Core pre-calc standards. They don't exist. Aside from a little bit of trigonometry here and there, math standards end at Algebra 2. So there's no way our children can be prepared for selective STEM careers or universities.
Just because the standards Common Core standards end at Algebra 2 does not mean that students do not continue to take trigonometry, pre-calculus, calculus classes in high school so that they are prepared for
I
college.
thought they needed standards so we would know what needed to be taught in the
They do,
classes.
and we have standards for those classes. They're just not Common Core standards.
All right, let me leave it there. I want to get back to our audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your concern.
Jennifer Hamlin, Pleasant View, Tennessee. Common Core goals are often abstract and schematic, and often they're a one-size-fits-all approach. When it comes to our autistic children, they do not work off of, and please do not use the verbiage transitional and standard when you answer my question, please. The autistic children have to have consistency, and the current Common Core standards has severely straitjacketed those students, and they are in essence going to be, or could be, an 18-year-old fifth grader. Please explain to me how the current Common Core standards decided that these children needed to be left out.
Jason?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think as we start to consider the needs of all of our students, one of the things that I believe that Common Core has really done is it's started a conversation in our schools. It started a conversation between faculty members, between principals, administration. It's just how are we personalizing learning for our students? How are we making sure that regardless of the needs that our students have, we're making sure that we address those needs in our classroom? And so when I start to think about our students who have special needs, I think that's one of the things that we continue to come back to is that what I'm doing in my classroom needs to address those needs. I have to make sure that I'm not isolating that child, and that oftentimes means I have to talk with other teachers. I have to approach those other teachers and say, what are some instructional strategies I might be able to utilize? And so what I believe that has been one of the strongest things that has happened in schools is that it's brought teachers out of their classrooms. It's started to engage people in conversation. Collaboration has been increased because we're no longer doing things by ourselves. Best things, we aren't going to reinvent the wheel, so let's share the best things. And I think some of those best ideas are the ways that we can serve our students with special needs.
And Julie, I ask you to hold that thought for a moment because I want to get a couple more questions. I want to check with social media, and I have to get the other side of the room where people have questions over there as well. So please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
Victoria Jackson, Thompson Station. This is not about making kids more intelligent. It is about changing our education from Judeo-Christian values to secular humanism, atheism, socialism, progressivism, which is a new word for communism, and globalism. And I'm tired of you tap dancing around with all these stupid words. That's what it's about. It's a fight for the hearts and minds of our children. To stand up for Common Core. Julie's doing this for free. But if these three were not getting paid, I would like to ask them, would you support a program that was never voted on by Congress or people or legislators, that was bribed into being, that was never done before, that was threatened, that was written by three guys who are progressives. One is David Coleman, which is a new word for communist, which has UNESCO and Agenda 21 behind it, and that is, what else can I say that's bad about it? Would you support that program if you weren't getting paid?
I'll put a question to David Mansour. I mean, SCORE is behind this, behind supporting Common Core. And the reason is?
The reason is because we have four key areas of work that we know that research show improve student achievement. And those four things are great teaching in every classroom, a great principal in every school, high expectations and standards for all students, and using data to help inform teaching and learning. And for that reason, we believe that the Common Core state standards are one part of Tennessee's work to improve student achievement.
We already have that.
All right, well, if I can follow up. Now, SCORE received a $250,000 grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation last October. According to the grant, purpose was to support outreach in Common Core state, standards in Tennessee. So, without the grant, the SCORE has still been behind Common Core?
Absolutely. When the organization was founded in 2009, one of our key pillars of work was high academic standards for all students. And so, yes, absolutely, the answer is yes.
It's also pro-Islam. Thank you.
Julie, because I'm going to check with our social media one more time.
I'm sure. I would say the Pioneer Institute, the loan organization that evaluated them and did not receive funds from either side to evaluate the standards, they deemed the standards unacceptable. And I would say, according to the Tennessee Constitution, we're to instruct our government as how to rule Article 1. And the people are saying, we don't want it. And that in and of itself is
check with our viewers at home, and afterwards have to get Cicely back in the conversation. We've left her out for far too long. So let's find out what's happening with our viewers, what's on their mind. Bob, what's the latest?
Well, one of the things we're getting, here's one from Jerry Minyard on our Facebook page. Looney, meaning Dr. Michael Looney, this is in Williamson County, of course, the superintendent there, has stated a serious shortfall in funding to implement the Common Core standards. Who will pay for the shortfall in funding? And of course, that could go back also to the question of why was there a delay in TCAP? Now, who's paying for that? And so that's something we could address. Also, there's someone named Trixie Berchada talking about Common Core complicates even the simplest problems. Even if the kids get the answer correct, if they don't follow the ridiculous formulas, the answer is marked as wrong. So I think we've all seen those sample questions in which it looks like something that maybe the rest of us would know how to get the answer, but if they don't attain it in a proper way, according to Common Core, it would be marked wrong. That's something that drives some of the folks crazy as well. Again, this is taking out of where does it come from and brings it right down to the students who are in the class.
Well, Cicely, so it's a great question because we see this in our morning news. We show these examples of these exams, quizzes, and tests that seem really bizarre. Now, we accept they're not specific to Common Core, but you can understand why people are concerned when we see these sorts of things. Who is actually vetting the material so that teachers like yourself are comfortable with the content and it meets your needs as the person who's actually teaching?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that Common Core requires students to do math in one way, requires them to do solve problems in one way, whereas in fact, it's completely the opposite. We value multiple solution paths. In my classroom, you'll see students having private think time and then working in small groups where they compare their solution paths and they talk about different ways to solve a problem. And then you'll see them getting up to make presentations. You'll see them talking about these different ways that they solve the problems. And y'all, we could do one task and have 5 different ways to solve it. And so when we say, oh, it's gotta be one way, it's gotta be this way, that is just completely not true. If you see this done in the classroom, you'll see how we really value the importance of these multiple solution strategies, especially in them.
Julie, I know you want to weigh in?
I would say we keep hearing that, but that's not what our children and our families are experiencing. And I would go on to say that in life, standards aren't what make you competitive. Your costs and qualification are what make you competitive. We keep hearing that we're always told about they're doing this in China and that in China and in Asia they're doing this. I actually called Singapore, okay, because I was told Singapore math was compliant, and I found that difficult to believe, having used Singapore, and found out, well, in fact, they did develop a core compliant curriculum, which lags 3 years behind the non-core curriculum. And I would say if we want our children to have the exact same standards and education and skills as the Chinese students that were, or Asian students that we're always hearing about, then we need for our children to be prepared to adopt a Chinese standard of living. But the fact is, America is #1 in creativity. We hold half the patents in the world. We're #1 in entrepreneurial aspirations and just slipped to 2 in the ability to make that a reality. And what is being forced upon children beats that creativity, beats that thought process out of them, and conformity and creativity are mutually exclusive, and we gotta get away from this.
We're running down into the last moments of our event tonight, so I'm going to ask my audience members to keep their questions short, and my panelists to keep their questions short. It's the lightning round from here on out. Jason, how do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, and I just want to quick weigh in, coming back to what the question was. When we take skills in isolation, it confuses a lot of people. So when you just see one problem all by itself, it can be confusing. But we can't forget, we can't ignore the fact that our students are in our classroom. And they're exposed to 60 or 90 minutes of instruction. And so it's our responsibility to make sure when they leave that classroom that they understand the skills and the process that we're working through in class. So that when they take a homework assignment home that might look different, they understand what they're doing. And it's even better if they can explain why they're doing it, because then they understand the logic behind it. And it's going to connect in a progression of skills that we're trying to build. But we can't just take those in isolation and use those as the only example.
We're back to the audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what's your question.
I'm Hannah Tiblier, I live in Williamson County, and this is a great follow-up to what we've been talking about. I had it written down at the beginning. But it's a two-part, super quick question. Of you 4 panelists, do you have children? What grades are they in? And are they in public school? Just real quickly.
All 4 panelists?
Yeah, real quickly.
Starting with Jason.
I have no children.
Yes, I have a rising 3rd grader and a rising kindergartner.
In public school?
In public schools, yes.
I have a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and we were forced to pull the youngest from Williamson County schools due to things related to Common Core.
David.
I do not have children.
Okay.
Any quick question?
What got my interest in Common Core is my son came home. He was 11 years old, and he had been formerly getting straight A's in math. And he came home with an F on his paper, and I said, "What is this?" And as I looked down, it was a multiplication set. He got all the answers right, but because he did not explain, and I remember the problem, wow, 6 times 8 is 48. It was marked half off. Because, and then he said, and then she said, "You have to explain why." And he said, "I can't explain to you why 6 times 8 is 48, so I guess I'm just stupid." And he made a sad face. And so when I asked him about that, he said, "It just is, Mom. Kind of like the alphabet starts with A and it ends with Z."
It's not exactly a question, but we'll make it a question. Jason, you can see, and again, we've seen on our morning shows examples of quizzes and tests that don't make sense.
And again, it comes back to we're looking at things in isolation. And I want to reemphasize that when these students are in our classrooms, we're going through those steps. We're having our kids model that reasoning for us. When we say why, there are students in the classroom who are explaining why. And so we're all exposed to that at the same time. And so that's a set of instructions that we're working through. Understand the frustration. You know, those are directions that we're given.
You explain why 6 times 8 is 48.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, when I asked earlier before the show who had questions, the very first person to put up her hand was this young lady right here. So please tell us who you are, how old you are, and then tell us what your question is.
I'm Juliet Dare, and I'm 10 years old. My question is, I did hangman division in school, and this summer my mom taught me how to do the old way. The hangman division didn't make sense. I did 4 problems for school, and it took me until 10 o'clock from 3, my whole homework time, from 3 to 10, to do those 4 problems.
So you want to know why it's a little more complicated?
Yes.
Cicely, why is it more complicated?
Well, I've never heard of
And
hangman.
you've heard it from a child that she knows.
Yeah, well, I have never heard of hangman. So, But what I really want to make sure that we understand here too is that our Common Core state standards really come up with a balance between new skill acquisition, application, and conceptual understanding. So when we start talking about multiplication, it's not enough anymore for us just to know our multiplication facts. We also need to know when we're going to apply multiplication, because it's important for life after high school. We also need to know the conceptual understanding of multiplication, that we're taking 6 groups of 8 things, and when we might need to use that. It's not enough anymore just to say 6 times 8 is 48 and we're done. So it's more than just skills. It's skills, it's application, it's conceptual understanding.
A quick follow-up to Julie, because I'm running out of time.
It has been enough since the beginning of time. What suddenly changed? And on that, I would say that idea ignores the developmental differences in children. Young children are hardwired to memorize facts. A little bit older, they can explain things. Why does the alphabet start with A? You can't explain it. It is a fact.
Nor is anybody asking you to explain what has changed. It's our society. It's our culture. It's our kids. Our kids are different. They're not the same. And they have had several classrooms full of them. And I know that they have different learning needs than what my first class did, because kids are changing. They have a different group of what they're exposed to.
All right, well, let me, Julie, I want to move on because I'm almost out of time, and clearly the next generation has questions. So please tell us who you are, how old you are, and what is your question?
My name is John, and I am 8 years old. My question is, why did this say this? 5 plus 3 equals 8. Explain it. How do you explain that?
And that was on one of your assignments?
Yes. How do you explain it in the school door?
So we have a couple examples. I know, and in all fairness, it is on isolation, but you can appreciate, Jason, why there might be some confusion, because I think as a parent, I might be stumped to explain why 5 plus 3 is 8.
Yeah, and I think it maybe brings up a bigger concern, is that we want to make sure that in our schools, to our parents, we want to have those lines of communication open. And we want to make sure that they're aware of what's going on in our classroom, what we're talking about, because these are their kids that they trust to us, and we want them to know that we're making sure that we have their best interest in mind, and that we're challenging them to grow, no matter what level they come to us at. We want every student in our classroom to grow. And so that might be one of the things that is a strong takeaway from this, is that if we move into a new school year, communication has to be have a really strong feature in every classroom.
We haven't heard from David Mansour, so I certainly hope your question applies to him. Please step over here. Please tell us who you are, how old you are, and what is your question?
My name is Ellen Sanders. I'm 9 years old, and my question is, why do we spend so many hours taking so many practice tests when the real test is in 5th grade, and when we could spend this time learning new things instead of just practicing for the real thing?
So you're saying you're taking practice exams in 4th grade to prepare for the 5th grade exam?
I even took some in 3rd grade.
Okay, so is this part of, David, is this part of the teaching towards the test approach? Is that why we have children who are taking practice exams?
That's a great question. So I would say first, the conversation about testing and whether we are testing too much or not enough and how we use tests is a really important conversation. And I think that as we think about why assessments are important and why it's important to know where students are, I think there are 3 really important things. First is it's important to know from parents, it's important to know where their child is and how they're doing and whether they're prepared to move on to the next grade. Second, and I think the teachers here can talk about this better than I, but it's important for teachers to know throughout the course of the school year how their students are actually doing, whether they're actually learning the content. And I think 3, it's important for the taxpayers to have some accountability to know that the money that's being spent on public education is being used in ways that are helping to improve students. So I think those 3 things are really important. We should always be asking the question, Are we using the right assessments? Are we having too many assessments, too few assessments? And those are conversations that teachers should be leading because they know the kinds of assessments that are needed in the system.
And I'm going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time. Now, certainly, we have high expectations for our children. We certainly expect more than just the basic 3 R's. We want math problems solved, books read, historical facts memorized, and diplomas granted. Because we want our children prepared whether they're entering our neighborhood or the global community. Certainly, a topic of discussion that's very divisive right now is Common Core. Hopefully, we've answered a few of the questions you may have had at home. I'd like to thank everyone at home who's joined us here this evening.